Operation Epic Fury, how the U.S. Navy eliminated Iran's fleet in 6 days. On February 28, 2026, at 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time, Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from U.S. Navy destroyers in the Arabian Sea. Their target, the entire Iranian Navy. Within 48 hours, every single Iranian warship in the Gulf of Oman was gone. All 11 of them destroyed, sunk, or burning at the pier. By day 6, over 30 Iranian ships had been eliminated. Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point for 20% of the world's oil, was effectively over. This is the story of Operation Epic Fury, the largest U.S. naval combat operation since the Iraq War, and how the Navy dismantled a country's fleet in less than a week. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This channel covers naval operations, strategy, and military technology. If that interests you, join us. Now let's get into it. To understand what happened during Operation Epic Fury, we first need to understand what was already in position. Because the Navy didn't scramble to respond to a crisis. The Navy was already there, waiting. For months leading up to the operation, the United States had been quietly building up naval forces across the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean. By late February 2026, 2 full carrier strike groups were deployed and ready for combat operations. The first was led by USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered supercarrier. Lincoln was operating in the Arabian Sea, positioned south of Iran. This is a massive warship, over 1,000 feet long, displacing nearly 100,000 tons, carrying an air wing of more than 70 aircraft. Her flight deck was loaded with F/A-18E and F/A-18F Super Hornets from multiple strike fighter squadrons, as well as F-35C Lightning stealth fighters. These are among the most capable combat aircraft in the world, able to deliver precision-guided munitions at ranges of hundreds of miles. The second carrier strike group was built around USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced warship ever constructed by any nation. Ford was operating in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. This ship represents a generational leap in carrier technology. It uses an electromagnetic aircraft launch system instead of traditional steam catapults, allowing faster and more efficient aircraft operations. Ford had already been supporting operations in the region for weeks, and her air wing could reach Iranian targets through coordinated air corridors stretching across Iraq and the Arabian Peninsula. But carriers don't operate alone. Each carrier strike group includes an escort of guided missile cruisers and destroyers. These are Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the backbone of the U.S. surface fleet. Each Burke carries up to 96 vertical launch cells. Those cells can be loaded with Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, standard missiles for air and missile defense, and anti-submarine rockets. A single destroyer carries enough firepower to devastate a small country's entire military infrastructure. That's just one destroyer. The U.S. had multiple destroyers at multiple firing positions. The guided missile cruiser USS Lake Erie was operating in the region. Multiple independently deployed destroyers were stationed at Naval Station Rota in Spain, providing additional Tomahawk capability from the Mediterranean. Destroyers from both carrier strike groups added even more launch cells. And then there were the submarines. The U.S. Navy never publicizes submarine positions, but it maintains a persistent undersea presence throughout the Middle East and Indian Ocean. Virginia-class and Los Angeles-class fast attack submarines, each carrying Tomahawk missiles and heavyweight torpedoes, were almost certainly positioned at key locations around the Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea. There were also littoral combat ships forward deployed to Bahrain with the Navy's Fifth Fleet. USS Canberra, USS Tulsa, and USS Santa Barbara were based there carrying the Navy's first operational mine countermeasure mission packages. These smaller ships would play a role in keeping the waterways clear. This wasn't a rapid deployment. This was a force that had been pre-positioned, supplied, armed, and ready for action on very short notice. Iran knew American forces were in the region, Their intelligence services tracked carrier movements. Their coastal radars could see the destroyers. But what Iran didn't know was exactly when the hammer would fall. Let's talk about the opening hours. The first shots of Operation Epic Fury came from the sea. According to CENTCOM, the United States Central Command, the very first weapons fired were Navy Tomahawk cruise missiles. Destroyers and cruisers launched coordinated salvos from positions across the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf. Dozens of missiles streaked toward Iranian naval installations along the country's southern coastline. The Tomahawk is a remarkable weapon that deserves a moment of explanation. It's a subsonic cruise missile that flies at around 550 miles per hour. That's not particularly fast in the age of hypersonic weapons. But speed isn't the Tomahawk's strength. Range and precision are. A Tomahawk can travel over 1,000 miles from its launch point. It navigates using a combination of GPS satellite guidance and terrain contour matching, literally comparing the ground below it to a preloaded digital map. It flies low, sometimes just a few hundred feet above the surface, hugging terrain features to avoid radar detection. And it strikes its target with accuracy measured in single-digit meters. You can aim a Tomahawk at a specific building, a specific wing of that building, even a specific floor. The initial targets were carefully selected. Warships sitting at their piers in naval bases along the coast. Anti-ship missile batteries positioned on headlands and beaches. Naval headquarters buildings where admirals and their staffs would be coordinating any response. Command and control facilities, radar installations, communication nodes, fuel and ammunition storage. The goal was comprehensive. Eliminate Iran's ability to coordinate any kind of naval response before their ships could even start their engines and get underway. At the same time, carrier-based strike fighters were launching from both Lincoln and Ford. F/A-18E Super Hornets from the strike fighter squadrons aboard Lincoln were armed with precision-guided bombs and air-to-ground missiles. These aircraft were airborne within the first hour of the operation. Pilots conducted pre-flight checks and launched into the darkness over the Arabian Sea, turning north toward Iran. From the Mediterranean, Ford's Air Wing added additional strike capacity. Strike Fighter Squadron 31 and Strike Fighter Squadron 87 sent Super Hornets on extended-range missions to hit targets deep inside Iran. Meanwhile, the destroyer USS Winston S. Churchill fired additional Tomahawk salvos from the eastern Mediterranean. CENTCOM also revealed that for the first time in combat, Task Force Scorpion Strike employed low-cost one-way attack drones. These are expendable unmanned systems designed to find and destroy targets at a fraction of the cost of a cruise missile. The Lucas drone system had only been tested from a literal combat ship at sea in December 2025. Now it was being used in actual combat operations just weeks later. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs described the opening moments. He said the first shooters at sea were Tomahawks unleashed by the United States Navy, which closed in on Iranian naval forces and began conducting strikes across the southern flank of Iran. But perhaps the most symbolically significant early strike was against the IRIS Shahid Bagheri. This ship deserves special attention because it represents everything Iran was trying to build. The Shahid Bagheri was a converted container ship, a large commercial vessel that Iran had spent 2 years transforming into a drone carrier for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. When completed, it was roughly the size of a World War II escort carrier. Its primary purpose was to serve as a floating base for launching Shahed series one-way attack drones and helicopters far from Iranian shores. These are the same types of drones Iran has supplied to Russia for strikes against Ukrainian cities, and to the Houthis for attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. By putting them on a ship, Iran could theoretically launch drone swarms from anywhere in the Indian Ocean or Arabian Sea without depending on land-based airfields. The Shahid Bagheri was the crown jewel of the IRGC Navy's asymmetric warfare capability. It represented Iran's creative attempt to project air power from the sea without the enormous expense of building a real aircraft carrier. It was struck at its berth in Bandar Abbas within hours of the operation's start. CENTCOM confirmed the vessel was on fire and effectively destroyed. Admiral Cooper later described it as an Iranian drone carrier roughly the size of a World War II aircraft carrier, and said that as he spoke, it was on fire. At the Konark Naval Base in southeastern Iran, satellite imagery from commercial providers told a devastating story. Multiple fires were visible across the facility. Sunken vessels could be seen in the harbor with their hulls partially above water. Buildings along the waterfront were reduced to rubble. A Jamaran-class corvette was struck at the pier in Chabahar and began sinking into the Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM posted imagery identifying the vessel and its location. Let me explain the Jamaran-class because understanding these ships helps you grasp the scale of Iran's losses. The Jamaran-class, also called the Moj-class, is Iran's primary domestically built surface combatant. These are the best warships Iran can manufacture on its own without depending on foreign imports. Each ship displaces about 1,500 tons and measures 95 meters in length. They carry a Fajr 27-76 mm main gun, 8 Noor anti-ship missiles derived from the Chinese C-802 design, 4 Sayad, 2 surface-to-air missiles for self-defense against aircraft, and 2 triple 324 mm torpedo launchers. Each ship has a crew of about 140 sailors. Iran had built 6 of these ships over the past 15 years, with a 7th under construction. They were not world-class warships. A single Arleigh Burke destroyer outclasses the entire Jamaran fleet in terms of sensors, weapons, and survivability. But they were the backbone of the Iranian conventional navy. They were what Iran had. Within the first 24 hours of Operation Epic Fury, multiple Jamaran-class ships were confirmed hit or sunk. The backbone was broken on day 1. Now let's talk about what happened by the end of day 2, because this is where the numbers become truly staggering. CENTCOM released a statement that stunned military analysts around the world. They posted on social media. 2 days ago, the Iranian regime had 11 ships in the Gulf of Oman. Today, they have 0. Let that sink in. 11 warships, operational armed naval vessels, gone in 48 hours. Not retreated to port, not damaged and limping home for repairs. 0. Every single one destroyed, sunk, or burning. CENTCOM added, the Iranian regime has harassed and attacked international shipping in the Gulf of Oman for decades. Those days are over. Freedom of maritime navigation has underpinned American and global prosperity for 80 years, and we will ensure it endures. The destruction extended beyond just combat ships. The IRIS Makran, Iran's unique forward-basing ship, was struck while moored at Bandar Abbas. The Makran was originally a Japanese-built Aframax crude oil tanker completed in 2010. Iran had converted it into a military platform capable of carrying helicopters, fast attack boats, and special operations forces. It had been used for Iran's most ambitious naval deployments, including transits to the Atlantic Ocean. It represented Iran's aspirations as a blue-water navy. Now it was another burning hulk at the pier. Satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Vantor showed the scope of destruction across naval bases along Iran's entire southern coastline. Bandar Abbas, Konark, Chabahar, Bushehr. At each location, the pattern was the same: precision strikes on ships, infrastructure, and supporting facilities. CENTCOM also confirmed targeting Iran's submarine fleet. Iran operated 3 Russian-built Kilo-class diesel-electric submarines. The Kilo-class is genuinely capable, relatively quiet when running on batteries, armed with torpedoes, and capable of laying naval mines. In the confined waters of the Persian Gulf, a Kilo submarine could pose a serious threat to even modern warships. Iran also had numerous midget submarines designed for coastal sabotage and mine-laying. While results against submarines were harder to verify from open sources, the combination of targeted strikes on submarine bases and active anti-submarine warfare by U.S. forces effectively neutralized this threat. Meanwhile, Iran fought back hard. The retaliation was massive in scale, if limited in effectiveness. Iran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones at targets across at least 10 countries. Approximately 162 missiles were fired at Israel, 167 at the United Arab Emirates, 46 at Qatar. Strikes hit Bahrain and Kuwait. Over 500 Shahid drones were launched against the UAE in the first 48 hours alone. Drone debris caused fires at the Burj Al Arab Hotel on the Palm Jumeirah. A strike targeted Dubai Airport, injuring employees. The Jebel Ali port was also hit. But here is the critical fact for this story. No U.S. Navy ships were hit. Not a single one. The fleet remained fully operational throughout the entire Iranian counterattack. The Aegis combat system aboard the cruisers and destroyers, the most sophisticated naval air defense system in the world, performed exactly as designed, tracking and engaging incoming threats while the carriers continued launching strike missions. The operation entered a new phase around Day 3. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper briefed alongside Secretary of War Pete Hegseth at CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa, Florida. Cooper's numbers told the story. The ship count had passed 30. In his words, "You may have heard the President say, we have sunk or destroyed 24 ships. That was true at the moment. We're now up over 30 ships. In just the last few hours, we hit an Iranian drone carrier ship roughly the size of a World War II aircraft carrier. And as we speak, it's on fire." The air campaign was equally devastating. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew from bases in the continental United States and Diego Garcia, striking deeply buried missile launchers and command bunkers that conventional aircraft couldn't reach. The B-2 carries the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker-busting bomb designed to penetrate hardened underground facilities. B-52 Stratofortress bombers, the venerable workhorses of American strategic air power, struck Iranian command and control posts. B-1 Lancers provided additional strike capacity against surface targets. In the first 100 hours, American bombers struck nearly 200 targets deep inside Iran, including facilities around Tehran itself. Over 2,000 total precision strikes hit more than 1,250 targets across the country. This was the most intensive air campaign since the opening of the Iraq War in 2003. Admiral Cooper reported that by Day 6, Iranian ballistic missile attacks had dropped 90% from Day 1. Drone attacks fell 83%. Iran's ability to fight was collapsing. And then Cooper signaled the next phase. He said, "The President gave us another task, to raise or level Iran's ballistic missile industrial base. So we're not just hitting what they have, we're destroying their ability to rebuild." As we transition to the next phase of this operation, we will systematically dismantle Iran's missile production capability for the future. Now let's talk about the strategic prize that justified this entire operation, the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the wider Indian Ocean. At its narrowest point, it's just 21 miles wide. The shipping lanes in each direction are only 2 miles wide, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. About 21 million barrels of crude oil pass through this strait every single day. That's roughly 20% of the world's supply. If the strait were closed for an extended period, the consequences for the global economy would be catastrophic. Oil prices would spike, manufacturing would slow, transportation costs would surge. Every economy on Earth would feel the impact. For decades, Iran has used the implicit threat of closing the strait as leverage against the West. Iranian fast attack boats, anti-ship missile batteries hidden along the rocky coastline, and stocks of naval mines were all positioned to make good on this threat. The strait was Iran's insurance policy, its ultimate deterrent. When epic fury began, Iran declared the strait closed. And initially, the effect was real. Crude oil transits dropped from 24 vessels per day to just 4 on March 1st. Oil prices surged past $90 per barrel. Roughly 300 tankers were trapped in or near the strait, their captains unwilling to risk transit. Insurance premiums for strait passage skyrocketed. Some shipping companies began rerouting entirely around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, adding weeks and enormous costs to every voyage. But Iran couldn't actually enforce its own blockade. Without warships, without functional anti-ship missile batteries, without an intact command structure, Iran simply didn't have the tools to close the strait. The Navy had taken those tools away. The IRGC did manage some attacks. At least 4 commercial vessels were struck in the Gulf of Oman in the early days, including fatal damage to the tanker MKD-VYOM. 4 crew members were injured on the Palau-flagged Skylight oil tanker near the coast of Oman. These attacks came from remaining IRGC fast boats and shore launchers that hadn't yet been destroyed. But each day the number of attacks decreased as more Iranian assets were found and eliminated. The tide was clearly turning. The U.S. responded with a $20 billion reinsurance program for commercial vessels transiting the strait. This was a remarkable move, essentially the federal government guaranteeing shipping companies against losses to encourage resumed trade. The message was unmistakable. The U.S. Navy will keep the strait open, and the American government will financially back that guarantee. So what does Operation Epic Fury mean in the broader context of naval history and future warfare? This operation represents the most thorough destruction of a nation's navy since the Falklands War in 1982. But even that comparison undersells it. In the Falklands, Britain sank a handful of Argentine ships. In Epic Fury, the United States effectively eliminated an entire country's navy, its surface fleet, its drone carrier, its support ships, and possibly its submarines, in less than a week. The operation validated key principles the U.S. Navy has invested decades and hundreds of billions of dollars developing. Precision standoff warfare works. Tomahawk missiles launched from ships hundreds of miles away destroyed Iranian vessels at their piers before they could respond. The ships never got the chance to fight. Carrier aviation remains decisive. 2 carrier strike groups operating from different oceans provided sustained, around-the-clock air superiority over an entire country. No other nation on Earth can do this. Submarine warfare dominance is real. The sinking of the IRIS Dina off Sri Lanka proved that U.S. submarines can track and eliminate targets anywhere in the world's oceans. And pre-positioning matters enormously. The forces were already in place. When the order came, execution was immediate. Every navy in the world is studying these results right now. China, Russia, India, and regional powers everywhere are watching and learning. The message is clear. Against the full weight of U.S. naval power, conventional surface fleets are vulnerable. Operation Epic Fury continues as I record this. The campaign is shifting from destruction to prevention, targeting Iran's weapons production facilities to ensure they cannot rebuild. The ultimate outcome of this conflict is still unfolding. But what's already undeniable is this. The U.S. Navy just proved in actual combat that it remains the most lethal and capable naval force in history. And the world noticed. If you found this analysis valuable, hit subscribe and the notification bell. I cover naval operations, strategy, and military technology, breaking down what's happening and why it matters. New videos are coming frequently as this situation develops. I'll see you in the next one.